Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Talk with Tubbs, a petrolhead's perspective. As always, I'm your host, Tapelo, aka Tubbs, and I'm going to talk you through this podcast that deals with everything motoring. We're going to talk what's new on the market, what's old on the market, what's good on the market, and also what's bad on the market. Then we're also going to delve into some motorsport, but more focused on my favorite form of motorsport, Formula One. We're going to talk driver lineups, what we feel, react, but most of all, I'm trying to give you a petrol head's perspective. Words that come from someone who's as passionate about the industry as anyone I know. So as ever, let me not waste your time. Here we go. Talk with Tubbs is a go. So, I know it's been a while since I was at this. Look, I always apologize for this, but sometimes life just gets too busy and I don't have time to sit down, record this podcast, or I just don't have time to go through what's happening during the week, what's new, what's hot, what's not. Anyway, so let's not waste time. Going in. I've referenced these guys on the podcast before. I went on a breakfast run with them, but I was approached by DriverMod and I was given the opportunity to write articles for them. So I'll link the article below, but I will contribute articles from time to time for the DriverMod website. Mostly focused on motorsport as a whole, but sometimes Formula One, but just things about how I feel, what I'm looking at, what I think, and stuff like that. It's extra to the podcast. So if you really can't get enough of me, you want to hear my thoughts, hop over there. I'll put the link again below. Just weekly or bi-weekly articles about Formula One. The first one I put up is about Christian Horner and Toto Wolff, what's really happening this season in Formula One. So yeah, it's a fantastic opportunity. And again, thanks to the guys for the opportunity. It's something I've always enjoyed writing and now speaking, but it's always cool to get myself out there. So if you really want to check it out, hop over to DriverMod. I can't remember the site now. I'll link it below. But hop over there, read what I've wrote and read what some of the other guys are writing. They've really got cool articles. They've got a cool YouTube channel with some interesting videos. So please check it out. And thanks for the support on that account. Thank you so much, guys. This really means a lot. It's a fantastic opportunity for me. So let's see how far I can keep pushing this Talk with Tubbs thing. So, I think it's 2 weeks ago now, we had to replace the front tires on the car at home. So obviously me being the petrol head, I'll never stay behind. I went with yada, yada, yada. So I got introduced to something I've always known to exist, but I kind of didn't put mind to it because I was not a part of it. But when we replaced the tires, we got approached by a guy who said, could I have those used tires? Now, they wanted them, they're selling secondhand tires. And this is the element I was introduced to. Should you really be buying secondhand tires? Hear me out, okay? Look, tires are expensive. There's no getting around that. Actually, almost everything is expensive these days, and there's no getting around that. So I kind of understand why people would go for secondhand tires that look decent, that still might do the job, over buying something brand new, because these are expensive. Depending on the car you have, you could be paying for 900 to 1,000 rand per tire on a budget tire. And if you want to get something decent, a Michelin, a Pirelli, whatever, you're already paying 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 rand, just depending on your size. These prices can shoot up to things like 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 rand. So it is an expensive thing. So I do understand why people would go for secondhand tires, because they're cheap. But are the compromises in safety worth it? And this is the problem. As you all know, I'm a big advocate for doing things safely. I always preach about this on the podcast. Whatever you do, try and do it as safe as possible. Not just for you, but for other road users as well. We don't drive alone on the roads. We share the roads with people. So again, whatever you do, always be mindful that the impacts of the decisions you take don't only affect you, but affect other road users. So what's my problem with secondhand tires? Because a, a lot of people will tell you that's what I've been doing for years and nothing has gone wrong. But that's the thing. The absence of failure does not mean there is no risk of failure. Hope that makes sense. Because here's the thing. Look, it's so complicated how tires are made, how different layers upon layers upon layers are compressed to form that tire, how different rubbers are used to form that tire. So many hours of research, development, engineering go into producing a tire. And there's a reason why tires have expiration dates, because these compounds, these rubbers, they deform over time, especially when they've been used. You don't know how the tire that's the second-hand tire that you buy, you don't know how it was used before. If the person who had those tires on their car was a rough driver, was speeding, was putting a lot of pressure and a lot of use into those tires, they were taking a lot of energy and a lot of life out of them. Meaning that even if the tire has a useful life of 3 years, with that level of usage, that level of force that goes through that tires, that useful life can decrease to something like 2.5 years or whatever. I'm using arbitrary numbers, but I'm trying to make a point here. It's that you don't know the condition of those tires. So they may look right because these guys will retread them, sort of cheat the system and open treads, and they'll look new. But the problem with a tire is a lot of the safety features and usage potential associated with the tire is not just the tread. That's just a percentage of the overall thing. Like I said, so much research, development, materials go into making a tire that the useful life and usage potential of a tire is also on the inside. It's what goes on underneath that tread that you see. So when we use tires, when we drive around, whether we're driving spiritedly or normally, we're still putting pressure on these tires. The forces that go through these tires, through braking, acceleration, turning, all these things contribute to how the internal material of the tire denatures, meaning how it changes from its original usage and shape to the current potential that it has. So what I'm trying to get at is, when you see a tire and it looks fresh on the outside, yes, it's a rule of thumb that people will tell you your tire gets old if it loses tread. That's true. But the more complicated explanation is things go on beneath the tread. So buying secondhand or retreaded tires is a really bad idea because it compromises so much on your safety and the safety of those around you. I think it's a process that you really shouldn't be considering. Rather save up to buy your tires. Be strategic about it. If you've got a front wheel drive car, buy tires in two sets. If you know, just be smart about it, but always try and keep your car balanced. If you're buying Pirellis for the fronts, only have Pirellis on the front. If you're going to stagnate your manufacturers, if you have Pirelli on the front, have it on the front. If you have Michelin at the back, have that at the back. Don't have one Pirelli and one Michelin in the front and vice versa. No, try and use the same manufacturer of and series of tire in the front and in the back. If you can, as I always look, it's a general thing, try and have the same brand of tire on all four corners of the car. It's just safer. It's just the same technology. It's the same process of manufacturing, because these companies don't manufacture their things in the same way. Some companies prefer a softer compound. Some companies prefer a harder compound. Look, I can go into detail about this, but please try and watch. And I've suggested this channel before, tire reviews on YouTube. They really go into proper detail about what goes into the construction and the potential of a tire. My job is just to answer the question, should you really be considering second-hand tires, or should you even be buying them? And I say no. As I've tried to explain, the deficiencies in safety from buying a tire like that do not outweigh the cost savings. Rather go for a budget tire that still will do the job and is still up to standard in terms of safety over buying a second-hand tire. You'll notice these things in braking, in acceleration, in cornering. You feel this if you drive and your tires are getting old. You feel how the car's potential and the way the car moves changes. So no, you shouldn't be buying secondhand tires. Honestly, it's a danger. It's a danger because a lot of, like I said, there's so many variables that go into making a tire, and you cannot account for any one of them when you buy a secondhand tire. You might, just because something has not happened, it does not mean the risk of something happening is not there. Please, as I always say, try and be safe, not just for you, but for everyone else on the road. You should not be buying secondhand tires. I don't care what you have to say. Buy brand new. Even if you have to move from a premium brand to a more budget brand, do that. It is worth it. It might just be the difference between life or death. So now that you know, it's been look, it was a big week for the car at home. We needed new front tires, and the car needed to go for service. And upon taking the car for service, it came out that Lexus has a safety recall. So I've put this on my Twitter a while ago. Only had the time to properly go to Lexus and sort it out last week. But anyway, so the safety recall, I'll just put it out there because it's still ongoing. Seemingly it's for two things. It's for the front airbags, which is a major safety component of the car, and it seems like there's a recall as well for the fuel pressure sensor. Now, if you're not sure if your car is part of the recall, I'm also not sure how far widespread it is. I assumed it was for Lexus models between 2007 and 2013, but that was a rough estimation. If you go on the Lexus South Africa site, there is a tab that says recalls, and if you enter your car's VIN number there, it will show up if your car is eligible to go there and have everything changed and checked. It's free. You just need to take your car there, find something to do for 2 to 3 hours, and then jobs are good in. I'll link the Lexus page down in the description box below. But upon taking the car to have the recall sorted out, I had to waste time. So one of the guys that worked there, really nice guy, I cannot remember his name now, but we decided to have a conversation. It was him, my father, and I. So three of us. And we're having conversations, and it was so refreshing to talk to someone who's yes, I do interact with people in the industry, but it was also cool to hear a different voice. And this guy was telling me about things that are going on, what's happening in Japan, and all that type of stuff. And I thought, because Lexus has been sending a lot of journalists on the drives for the new IS300H, it was a good time as any to put this into a podcast because of the new information I heard from those guys. Again, he was so cool about it, shared a lot of information, and I'm going to touch on a few points that he said that I found really, really interesting. So, the current Lexus cars, right? So, look, we all know what's happening with the emission regulations and all that type of stuff, and how a lot of manufacturers are having to downgrade their engine sizes and that type of stuff. And it hurts me to say, but we will no longer be getting the Lexus V6 in South Africa. I know some countries are still getting it, especially like the US. Hell, they're even getting the IS 500, which is the 5-liter V8. But yeah, the only Lexus that will be coming to us is the 300H, which is a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine with hybrid. I think it's turbocharged. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but I know it's a hybrid. And that's coming, which is a bummer because I've grown so attached, and I love the Lexus V6. It's just a good all-around engine. So good for touring. Really not bad on fuel consumption. Again, that thing varies depending on how you drive, but it's such a good it was a naturally aspirated engine. That's why I love naturally aspirated engines. But seemingly Lexus is only bringing in hybrid cars. And the problem with this is, I asked him, I was like, why? Because South Africa is not that stringent on emissions. A lot of cars are coming in. And he says the problem is the cost potential of it all. Having to produce V6 engines for such a small market, whereas I think he said South Africa only contributes 1% to global Lexus sales, is not enough for them to continue bringing it. Whereas they're building hybrid engines and hybrid powertrains in bulk, so that's what they can bring to South Africa. It's just cheaper to bring in those hybrids. As much as it hurts, it makes business sense, and I can understand that. I haven't driven the car, or I haven't been in the car, so I cannot really explain how the new hybrid powertrain fares against the old naturally aspirated stuff. But yeah, it's changes, and it's the way the current car environment motoring sector is going. So we're getting the hybrids, and one of the interesting stuff is I also saw the new UX hybrid, right? They continued the petrol only derivatives and they bring in hybrids. They're not plug-in hybrids though. They pour petrol and it charges itself and all that type of stuff. It's not a plug-in hybrid. So I asked him about the UX, and he said, because I saw there was a new UX, a electric variant, and he said there were plans to bring that as well to South Africa. Now this is where it gets interesting. Apparently, in September last year, representatives from Lexus in Japan were in South Africa to do research to see if bringing in an electric only variant of the UX would be a viable business solution, right? So when they were here, they checked our power grid, checked our infrastructure and that, and they finally came to the conclusion that they are not going to bring the electric UX to South Africa. They're only going to bring in the hybrid variants. Reason being, one of the things they found that while they were charging the car, the output of our electrical grid fluctuates a lot. So the voltage you get fluctuates. It's been a while since I've done electricity, so I might be talking a lot of crap, but this is what I heard. It fluctuates a lot. So what that does is it has a significant impact on charging times for the cars. What happens is if the current goes up, it goes down. So your cars generally take longer, and it's never the optimum things they want to see. The times they say they should be full, all that type of stuff. So it compromises that electrical system. So that's one of the things. And then of course the blackouts, the lack of infrastructure, etc., etc. But those are one of the big things. They found that lacking, so they decided not to bring the electric cars here. We'll get the hybrids. Now, I'm not going to go on a tangent of conjecture on what that would mean for other brands who are choosing to bring in electric cars and all that type of stuff. I've touched on it before. I think I'll touch on it again in future because this is a current and developing thing. But if this is what it takes to have brands still relevant in our markets and still driving, that we need to shift to hybrids, I don't have that big a problem with. Yes, I will always value big engines. I love my big engines. I love naturally aspirated stuff. I've grown to love turbocharging because I understand what it's about and the benefits of that. So that I'm fine with. If the halfway house between losing internal combustion engines and going to electric is having a hybrid, whether plug-in or not, I think that is a compromise I'm willing to make. If I have to have my daily as a 1 liter hybrid or a 2 liter hybrid, that's fine. And my weekend car is a straight six, V6, V8, whatever. I think that's a compromise I'm willing to make. Again, the problem is these cars are so expensive now that, electric is not the final frontier. I still don't believe it is, especially in South Africa. So you still get a lot of value from going to the secondhand market. So that's one of the things I wanted to touch on. Another thing is, we know Toyota, Lexus, and other Japanese brands are infamous for their reliability and how they go. So our car has done, it's just ticked over 180,000 kilometers now. So we had a jokes about that, and the guy said someone bought in an IS, I think it was a 2007 car, and he has done 1,038,000 kilometers on that thing, and it's still running. It's still running. It's still good. So one of the internal things they say at Lexus is that they build cars to go 1,000,000 kilometers. So he said the car is actually just done 38,000 kilometers. And I found that really funny because I think it's also Matt Farah in the US. He has an LS that's done over 1.6 million kilometers. That's really crazy. That's really crazy. It's also cool. So look, there's a lot of things they said right there. Even with the sales, it's just so crazy. There's a lot of information out there. If you do have time, try and go to your nearest dealership for any brand. Doesn't have to be Toyota, Lexus. It can be BMW, Mercedes. And if they're willing to kind of tell you some stuff, not a lot will be that open with a lot of the information that goes on behind the scenes, but there's a lot to be learned and there's a lot to be known from talking to people in the industry. Again, use your social media. That's the plug. But yeah, there was a lot of interesting things. So I just wanted to point out that the whole hybrid thing, it really amazed me and also disappointed me about the current situation at Lexus. But look, if that's the compromise we have to make, then that's the compromise we have to make. But overall, yeah, it's an interesting brand. I still have a soft spot for the brand. There are places where I feel they're lagging behind their competition, and there are places where I still feel like they're a tad ahead. But all of that is, again, some of these things are so subjective that what I like, you might hate. So, whatever it is, that's my update about my day at Lexus. So, my final topic for today, and it's quite a big one because this came off the back of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix where Lewis Hamilton made the mistake after the restart with the whole brake magic, and that resulted in him losing his position. He was in first at the time, shooting off, overshooting the corner, and ultimately finished, I think, 15th. So on social media in the week after that race, a lot of people were saying, oh, Hamilton is buckling under pressure. He's not there. Verstappen is putting so much pressure that we're seeing chinks in Hamilton's armor. And I kind of wanted to get into this, right? So I've been sitting around and I've been looking at what people are saying, listening to other podcasts about what they think about the issue. And I think I finally formulated a cohesive opinion on the whole thing. So the question, is Hamilton buckling under pressure? I'm going to split it up. I'm going to split it up into things that we know and things that we don't know, things that are rumors and all that. So what do we know, right? And this is what we know so far. Mercedes are struggling because of the new regulations. They've resulted in a car that is very difficult to get into its operating window. That's a given. We're seeing that week in, week out. That's why you can see, and this happened in the previous week at the French Grand Prix, where Lewis Hamilton was considerably slow throughout the whole weekend in Friday practice and Saturday practice, but then he kind of got it into the operating window in qualifying and subsequently the race. So it's always a struggle for Mercedes to get that car to where they want it to be for it to perform. This is why you'll always see them working so hard just before qualifying, making changes to the car. So that's what we know. Mercedes are struggling with the car, especially in terms of getting it to heat up its tires and get it into the optimum performing spec, temperatures, and all that type of stuff. Another thing that we seem to know so far is things are not going the way they have for the previous years at Mercedes. And I'm talking about internally. Toto Wolff has been very vocal this year, more than he is in previous years. And this happened with the botched pit stop for Valtteri Bottas. This happened with the drivers running different setups. This happened with Toto Wolff going against Christian Horner, which I touched on in my article. And this is happening as well with the brake magic button mistake Hamilton made. This also happened this week with Valtteri Bottas voicing his disapproval at Mercedes' strategy that he wanted to go for a two-stop. They opted for a one, and how that ultimately cost them in the race. This also happened with just the way Mercedes has been running. They've accepted fault. They've said to Lewis Hamilton after the French Grand Prix, fantastic drive, this was on us. Now, a lot of the things we won't really know, but it seemingly that something is not right in the internal structure of Mercedes. I don't know what it is, but they're just not running as smooth an operation as they used to do in previous years. Strategy calls that Mercedes would be making have seemingly now started to go to Red Bull. In previous years, Mercedes would have made that call for a two-stop so that they can maximize their on-track potential. They didn't do that. They opted for a one-stop and rather relied on the driver's capabilities. Look, Formula One, I know this is going to kind of feed into the narrative that it's always been the car. It hasn't. You know how I feel about this. You cannot say it's always been the car when a layman like me cannot drive a Formula One car. There has to be synergy between the driver, the car, the team, the strategy, everything. Whether you like it or not, Formula One is a team sport. And in order to succeed, you need to be with a a successful team. That's just the way it is. So Mercedes have, this year in particular, because of the new regulations, they've grown so close, so dependent on the driver's capabilities to maximize their car, because they seemingly can't get a grip on how the car wants to work. And you see that with the French Grand Prix, them wanting to go on a one-stop strategy. With Lewis Hamilton, that's an easier bet because we know how good Lewis Hamilton can be on his tires. We saw that in Bahrain, we saw that last year in Turkey, and we've seen it in other races where Lewis Hamilton just manages to pull every inch of performance and longevity from the tires he has on his car. But to expect Valtteri Bottas, who, given his considerable talent, is not as good on tire management as Lewis Hamilton, that's a different ball game altogether. You need to play to the strengths of the car, but also the strengths of your drivers. So yeah, that kind of stuff. There's something afoot at Mercedes, and I cannot put my finger on what it is, but something is not gelling the way it usually does. Now, here's what we don't know. Valtteri Bottas has slumped in performance in 2021. Yes, he's coming all right in the previous race, but this season so far, and it's further compounded with the fact that Red Bull have become super competitive. So Mercedes need both cars, both drivers getting the points, defending for each other. But Valtteri Bottas has slumped in form. And what that does is it's brought about the rumor that Valtteri Bottas, and again, this is the part of we don't know, but there's rumors that are circulating that Valtteri Bottas has already been told that he won't have his contract renewed for 2022. And this is significant because both Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas have one-year contracts that end at the end of the season of 2021 this year. So if Valtteri Bottas has been told that he will not get his contract renewed for 2022, and seemingly how every team on the grid has secured their driver lineups for next year and beyond, the only option for him is Williams. Now, what that could do to the psyche of Valtteri Bottas is he doesn't have to put in that much effort. He doesn't care. Whether Mercedes win or lose, there's no tangible impact on him because he has already been told that he is leaving the team. That does a lot of damage, and we know this in Formula One. When you're going to be phased out of a team, or when you've already been told that your contract will not be renewed, you don't attend as many driver briefings as before. You don't attend as many technical meetings as before, because that presents the opportunity for you to leave with critical insider knowledge and apply that to your new team. So that's a big rumor, but that might also be key to what's happening to Valtteri Bottas. And I know the main question is Hamilton buckling under the pressure? And I'm still going to get to that. This is part of the explanation to my final answer. Secondly, there's a rumor that, okay, we know that George Russell wants to have his future really sewn up really quickly. He wants to know by summer, winter for us, or around June, July. He wants to know what's happening to him next year. Rumors are Mercedes are putting him into the car next year. And the announcement should be made around Silverstone. I'm not sure when the dates are. Just know British Grand Prix. We should know what's happening with George Russell. But that's another thing that presents an imbalance within the team. If that is true, it also gives weight to what's happening with Valtteri Bottas and the seemingly imbalance and things that are going on internally at Mercedes. Another big rumor that I heard, but I have no way of confirming, but it's been in the media for a while now, is that Mercedes might leave Formula One. And this is how it's going to go. So if you don't know, Mercedes essentially has a three-pronged partnership for the Mercedes-AMG Formula One team. That's 33% Mercedes themselves, 33% Toto Wolff, and 33% Ineos, the team that's running. So apparently the rumor is Mercedes is going to step back, have it be Ineos, Wolff, whatever. It's going to be those two guys, but Mercedes will continue to be an engine supplier. Now, if this is the case, again, this is something we don't know, it's a rumor, but that could point to further instability and why Mercedes are struggling to gel as they have for the previous years. That is a possible reason. And as we've seen already, Mercedes is hemorrhaging personnel to the new power development project that Red Bull is starting up from next year, I think. A lot of guys have been jumping ship from Mercedes and going over to Red Bull. Maybe I'm reading too much into that because people are still allowed to make personal decisions of moving from company to company. But if this really is the death of Mercedes as we know it, that could explain why so many people are moving over. Now, again, this is a known element. The pressure of Red Bull has put Mercedes in a position that they haven't been for quite a long time. Yes, they've had competition, but they've never had competition this strong. And now here is my answer to the question. Is Lewis Hamilton buckling under the pressure? The answer is yes and no. No, in the sense of it depends on which pressure you're talking about. Is Lewis Hamilton buckling under the pressure of having competition? I don't think so. The mistakes that Lewis Hamilton has made, and yes, there have been several. We saw that him trying to go for the overtake that resulted in wing damage in Imola. We saw how he tried to go past George Russell, ended up going off track. We know the brake magic issue. Those are mistakes that aren't characteristic of the way Lewis Hamilton is. However, these are mistakes that a lot of drivers make. And I think because of where we are in this season, where we're focusing so much on Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, these mistakes are further highlighted into the spotlight. If anyone else made this kind of mistake, we would kind of gloss over it. So yes, these mistakes are uncharacteristic, but they're not from the pressure of Max Verstappen. I think these mistakes, and this is the yes part of is Lewis Hamilton buckling under the pressure, these mistakes are coming from the internal struggles of Mercedes-AMG Formula One team. And that's the problem. I think they've become so dependent on their drivers being so exceptional on track that they are making up for the deficiencies and failures and weak points of the car. If the car is struggling to get its tires warmed up, this is why Mercedes has gone to resorting to an extra warm-up lap in qualifying. This is why Lewis Hamilton is making mistakes, because he now has to drag that car to the front of the grid, whereas there's no longer the synergy of the car bringing effort and he does, and it's matching him. Now he is outworking the car, he's outperforming the car, and that's the pressure that I feel Lewis Hamilton is buckling under. Not because Lewis Hamilton is not talented, he's one of the most talented drivers we've seen in any form of motorsport, but the pressure to be that anchor for a team, especially when Valtteri Bottas is struggling, especially when Red Bull seem to finally have a super competitive car and a driver lineup that's maximizing every potential for points. The pressure that falls on Lewis Hamilton alone is making him edgy. I don't want to say he's making him bad. I think it's making him edgy. Now, I think Daniel Ricciardo summed this up best when he got into the McLaren. He said, when asked why he was struggling so much with the McLaren, he said, I have to think about driving the car. I'm no longer feeling it. And I think this is so important for drivers in any form of motorsport. You drive so much that certain situations become second nature. You're not really cognizant of what you have to do. You just do it. It's instinctual. It's your instincts that are driving the car. And I think this is what's happening with Lewis Hamilton. He's juggling so many things, mostly team related, but also pressures around. He's a 7-time world champion. Everyone was expecting him to go for his 8th, all that type of stuff. I think he's not buckling under the pressure of having competition on the grid. Look, as any sportsman will tell you, I will even tell you this. I played sports in high school and in my university. What happens is every time you get on the field, on the track, wherever you have to perform, it does not matter whether you're playing the best team or the worst team. The pressure to succeed and the pressure to perform well is always there. So even when Hamilton was super, super dominant in the Mercedes years past, there was still pressure for him to perform. There was still pressure on him to be the best. So he's not buckling under that pressure. He's buckling under the pressure of being the shining light for a Mercedes team that is struggling to get itself on track. They've got a difficult car. They've got internal structures that just don't seem to be working. I think we're seeing this as well with Toto Wolff. He's being catty. He's being, sorry to use the word, but he's being bitchy. He's complaining like a petulant child. All this points to something not being right at Mercedes. And this is the pressure that I think Lewis Hamilton is struggling with. I still have faith in Lewis Hamilton. I support him, and I think there is still potential for him to turn the season around. Look, the gap is not that big. I think it's 14 points. We're only 7 races in of a 23 race season. This season has a long way to go. But if Lewis Hamilton can get on top of that car and the team can kind of get grips with what's happening, there's potential for that Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas to a degree. But Lewis Hamilton is struggling with the pressure of this team not knowing what's happening. It's a difficult situation for Mercedes and their drivers. And I think this is further compounded with the way things are right now. So, yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there. Those are my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. As always, I hope you like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, share this podcast with your friends. As always, I love doing this. I love having feedback. If you feel I should talk about something or things you want to see, want to hear, or constructive criticism, please leave it in the comments below or hit me up on my Twitter. My DMs are open. You can tell me whatever you want. As always, follow me on social media at tabs_Meriohle, THAPZ_MEREOHLE. Check out my articles and related articles on DriverMod. Again, check the description below. I'll link things that are important. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a fantastic week. And as we're looking forward to the Austrian Grand Prix,